happened, India was still struggling to put its act together in the late 60s and early 70s. And when the fourth industrial revolution is what we are seeing right now, what better than using the empowerment of digital technologies to make sure the quality of life of every Indian, every citizen can be enhanced. And that was the aim that the Prime Minister set out, this mission called Digital India Mission, and set out as India's choice. Again, a very, very federal program, something that is driven bottom up, but the numbers speak for themselves. India started, and I'll talk about this because, is the clicker on? Yeah, it's working now, thank you. And so, you know, why this slide is very important, and I'm going to explain in taking a second what this is saying. This is a typical income pyramid of a country like India, would represent Africa. You take the name out India and probably put some different numbers, but the pyramid, the shape and size will probably be the same globally, apart from all the developed countries. And in this income pyramid, what India decided is that when we do digital, we have to get it right. And I know this conference is a lot about inclusion, about empowerment. Africa is about that. And what India decided to do was to make sure that our digital approach is not blue to red, means not top down, which is where the Silicon Valley approach is, where I worked for many, many years, 20 years, but bottom up, which means going and addressing the lowest, the most vulnerable, the most excluded first, and making sure that they are included, they get benefited from this whole digital revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. So that was the first goal of doing this. And what did it do? From 140 million, India has about 1.4 billion citizens, 140 million people who could connect to the internet before the launch of the program. Today, that number is almost 840 million people. That is the number of connected citizens we have. One in every family, more than one in every family. India has about 240 million households, 840 million connected individuals in the country in a rapid span of 8 years. And that shows, and when I came last to talk about this number about 4 years ago was 400 million. In 4 years, in fact, in the last 2 COVID years, we've added 250 million people to the internet, to the smart highways of the world, the global highways. And along with that, today, India is an integral market for any of these global platforms, let alone technologies from anywhere in the world. So India has to picture in that equation. But what was the Digital India program? Okay, so it is only going one way. If I can make it go back. Yes, okay. Yes, it's working now. Okay, so what is happening? The Digital India program was launched to make sure there is connectivity to every single Indian. Number one, affordable connectivity. With a device that they can use. That's also very important. Like you can make the highways, the roads, but you need to have drivers who know how to drive, and you need to have affordable cars, because if you only have the expensive ones, they won't be able to afford it. So that was the goal. And of course, they need to be trained enough to drive that car properly. So that was a literacy program. So that was creating the citizens, the markets that can actually use the internet, the digital highways. The second was create a digital public infrastructure, which is also what I'm going to talk about, that can actually spur an innovation ecosystem, that can solve the societal problems of India. And these were both being done very parallelly. India is the only country in the world, my friends, which has digital public goods, which means platforms which are available to everybody to use. And I'm going to talk about it. Startups, the government, businesses, anybody can use technology. It's not owned by one person. It's not a Facebook. It's not a Microsoft. It's not owned by a limited set of shareholders. The public owns it. It's the most democratically run public platform. It's called digital public goods. I know RWanda is taking a lead in it too. So what are the trends we are seeing? Number one, Indians are going digital. I just talked about 840 million. Two, we are making digital infrastructure public goods like roads. So the roads example is very appropriate. And three, 1 billion Indians are producing data by the gazillions. We are the data billionaire of the world. We are the biggest data mining. So anything, any diverse set of data you want like Africa, India also has it. 23 different languages, official languages, 800 dialects, literacy levels of all levels, income levels of all different disparities. So we are a country which is producing data for algorithms, for new research. We are the research capital from a data perspective of the world. So that is the third trend we are seeing. And in the process, what has happened? We produce this digital public goods. But at the core of this digital public goods, we have an identity platform. It's not a smart card. It's not something that we carry. Actually, we do. The identity is this 10 fingerprints, 2 iris scans. This is my identity. I can authenticate myself sitting right here in Kigali or for a banking transaction in India. And that is the core of how we have prospered. We have done KYC for bank accounts. We don't have to give any paperwork. We do KYC for our telecom, our SIM accounts, using one number, one identity. Every Indian, anybody who has lived in India for more than 180 days has this number, by the way. You don't need to be a citizen. So, two, we put eKYC on the cloud. So all my documents, yesterday, in fact, my friend who is expert in who would have heard of last evening, Pranjal, was looking for, we had to give our passport for taking some exchange. And none of us were carrying passports, right? I mean, I'm not going to carry my passport around. What do I have? I have it on a DigiLocker, kind of a Dropbox if you use, on the cloud, authenticated by the government. My mark sheets from my school, from my university are there. I cannot fudge them. All my vaccine certificates are there, by the way. I can access them on the fly. This is called a DigiLocker, authenticated documents issued by the government, given to every citizen of India. And this helps us do eKYC. I send a link to my SIM card company or a bank account, and that opens my bank account. I don't need to give any paperwork.
What happened yesterday when you were wanting a passport?
I showed the DigiLocker account.
Oh, you showed it?
I just showed from a DigiLocker, that's it, verified document. I can show it to you if anybody's interested.
No, but you got your exchange, right?
Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. The taxi driver won't drive me back, as simple as that. What we also did with that, and this is the example of the fourth industrial revolution, the empowerment. India had highest level of financial exclusion. Only 42% of Indians have had access to the bank account about 8 years ago. And the core reason was not less banking, not less banks available in the country, but again, a simple problem of citizens not feeling empowered enough to walk into a bank account and opening a bank account because the paperwork requirement is so high. We made it light using technology. Every citizen today can open a bank account, presence-less, by the way. No need to go into a bank account. I open bank account sitting in anywhere. I've shown it in 55 seconds into the Silicon Valley czars. And paperless, presence-less, using the eKYC system I told you. And what it did was 460 million people have opened bank accounts in India. Biggest financial inclusion of the world anytime anybody has seen. 1.5 times the population of America, by the way, in less than 5 years. And that is what technology does. And that's what Digital India program was all about. It was not just giving toys at the hands of people to play more games, which they do, of course. They watch a lot of entertainment. But along with that, do things which empower people. And see what has happened. From 155th in data inclusion, 155th ranking, we are now number 1. 840 million people consume data at the cost of 1.1 cent US dollar a GB, and see our data consumption from 200 GB has gone up to 14 GB a month. That's the amount of data that we are consuming in India, the content we are consuming in India. Second thing about payments, and this is, I'm contextualizing to RWanda at least. I've seen M-Pesa, Airtel Money all over town. I don't know whether they're interoperable. I don't know whether interoperable means can I use my M-Pesa account to pay for Airtel money? Can I use my bank credit card? Everybody is charging me 3% extra on every credit card that I pay. Why? You're penalizing me to use digital payments. We've gotten rid of that in India. Anybody can use a digital payment system as long as you have a mobile phone. No need for internet. You can actually call up a number and say, this is Arvind Gupta, we authenticate you, and then we can transfer money. Zero cost. Both to the giver and the receiver. Zero cost. And what we have done via that is 6 billion transactions a month. 6 billion. The biggest payment system on planet. Not Visa, not MasterCard.
Not China. We are 10x China, 5x China.
Yeah, 5x of China, by the way. So if anybody is listening from China, they should understand this. This is 6 billion transactions a month done by ordinary citizens of India, remitting money who is to give 10% away to brokers to remit money. There is no Western Union now to remit money. They can't exist because the business model is disrupted. Because payments from me to Mr. Samir Saran, even if I'm making 5 rupees, which is less than 10 cents, is zero cost. To 500 rupees, zero cost. So it's very, very democratized. Everybody has access to it. And you know now, and I know I can tell these stories forward and forward, but what was the intent of this? This is the example of financial inclusion. Banks have used it, our open technology, digital India technology. But which was intended, the real reason was the government. The government transfers welfare. Most of the countries have welfare, right? You get some scholarships, some subsidies. We had leakage. We had 80 million fakes, people who didn't existed in the welfare system. But the intended benefit of this was actually to start with, was first for the government to save money. Because we were finding so many fakes, duplicates. I mean, Samir did explain, I was one of the only private sector people who was ever part of the government. And when I was in the government, we suddenly realized that we are paying payroll for people that have never shown up. Never. So, I mean, either they were doing absenteeism, but later we realized it was not absenteeism, that people didn't exist. They were ghosts, basically. And for a country of 1.4 billion people, 80 million were ghosts. So, we discovered, we actually started transferring all our benefits, all our attendance, everything through the biometric system. It's called the direct benefits transfer. And this direct benefits transfer, to make this whole system that I'm talking about, costed us $2 billion. But the government itself has saved $30 billion in identifying fakes, duplicates, and ineligible people. And we have transferred almost everything in India. In fact, I have written an article on this. We've done a study with ORF, by the way, where if it was not the availability of direct benefits transfer system, we would have not survived the COVID pandemic. We transferred to 800 million people benefits every month, so that they could get their food, their money, directly into their bank account. There were no food stamps, there were no queues. People got their money and they could spend it in a public distribution system to buy their food. So there was no, I mean, a country size of India, there was no social crisis. And that was at the backbone of our benefit system. One of the intended consequences of building this connectivity and these public platforms was startups. India, again, in the last 5 years, we launched the Startup India program on 16 January 2016. Since then, 65,000 startups have come up. The value of these startups combined is close to $500 billion. 105 unicorns. 105 unicorns. Unicorns are companies which are valued at $1 billion each. Right? So if you 105 unicorns, that's $105 billion minimum. Some of them are 5 billion, 10 billion plus. So we have created value for the society, for the government, and for startups. The innovation ecosystem, by creating your own, owning your own destiny, is very huge. So when you build on top of a Google or an Apple, you create value for them. Startups understand this. But when you create on top of a digital public goods, you create value for yourself. The government doesn't realize value in this. Of course, we realize value because it's societal value. Taxation, employment, innovation ecosystem. So that's a startup angle to building digital India. Real quality of life changes. I come from an education institute in India called the IITs. I graduated way back. I shouldn't even mention it. When I graduated, I went to the US to study. And in the US, when I was graduating there, it was so remarkably different because my classmates who didn't go to the US only wanted to work in a big company. That was the aspiration. I want to work for a software company. And in the US, I want to go and work in Silicon Valley. I want to do a startup of my own. I don't want to work for somebody. I want to work for myself. Today, India is in that state. No college graduate. I teach a course in that IIT. My students don't come and say how I can get a better job. They're discussing with me every day how I can create a better startup. And that's the change in mindset this whole ecosystem creation has done. They've seen success stories. They've seen 65,000 startups being successful and maybe 100,000 in the works. So I strongly suggest that you want to study this. These are the unicorns and they've gone up in all sectors. And this is the last slide. I leave it that once we've tasted success as the government, that we have disrupted finance, insurance, we're not stopping there. We're building digital public goods using the backbone of this 850 million connected citizens in areas as travel, health, very critical, education, skilling, and something that, again, I am involved with is credit and also e-commerce. Very ambitious project. Can you imagine e-commerce not being, if you think e-commerce, you're not thinking Alibaba, Amazon, the Walmarts of the world. Yes, India will do that. India is going to create an alternate system which is not going to be dependent on any of them. And not only will create, we have created it. Another 4 months it will be live, up and running. So the ambitions of Digital India is to control our own destiny, to empower our citizens, to improve their quality of life, to give startup movement, innovation movement, ecosystem a boost, and actually play a leapfrogging role, a leadership role in the fourth industrial revolution. But at the center of this is the bottom of the pyramid. To making sure that the bottom of the pyramid is included, is participating in this growth, and is benefiting from this, not the top-down approach which solves the problem of 1 billion people, the richest of the world, rather than the next 6 billion which come from the top. So that's my brief. I'm sorry I ran out of time, but I think a little bit role, some props had to play in that. Thank you very much. I'm around. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind, and I'm sure you'll have